It all began in Shanghai one Saturday morning in 2010 when I stood on the corner of Shillong and Longhu roads, counting vehicles without exhaust pipes. 72, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 73, 34, 35, 36, 738. These were bicycles of all kinds and the occasional electric scooter. I counted 1,000 in half an hour. I wanted to make an environmental comparison with the West, a comparison that would be very different today now that the car has stepped up to take its rightful place in an even more developed Chinese economy. I had a bike myself to travel around the square mile where I lived and worked in the south of the city. It was called Shuang Zulong, which ironically translates as bipedal, because one of the pedals actually fell off the first time I used it. Anyway, this was data collected, and when the Knoll West Media Centre advertised a project called Whose Data a year later, I talked about this Shanghai experience in my application, and I remembered it when the work began. This time the counting happened in shops, the convenience stores of Knoll West. I stood close to the till trying to be invisible, noting down the categories of what people bought rather than the brands, like soft drink, energy drink, booze, fags, tobacco, lottery, white bread, eggs, crisps, biscuits, milk, newspaper, paypoint, sweets, pie, onion. I wasn't aiming to be judgmental about their shopping, but when I read from these lists at a public event a few weeks later, a local councillor in the audience described this as significant research into cultural deprivation. I also looked at biodiversity, at the variety of other species living here. And I had Steve, the media centre's then caretaker, as a special data bank. It soon became clear that his knowledge and understanding of local wildlife was a part of him, of who he was. I borrowed a sound recorder and met Steve just before dawn. He took me to the Wills site, the Bommy, the Black Path, and the Horse Field. The birds were enough, and he knew it. The dawn choruses became fantastical symphonies of competing soundscapes, natural and man-made. In between recordings, Steve spoke shyly about his boyhood experiences as a poacher, and with authority that we were standing in a green oasis for plants, birds, and other creatures. From their perspective, Knoll West is a rich source of food, cover, and opportunity. Up here, the pattern of open land, housing, and the many patches of green space are only interrupted by the major highway that is Hartcliffe Way. Still thinking about data, I came back a year later with another idea, this time related to binary code. I would visit every street in Knoll West and photograph all the house numbers that contained a 1 or a 0 or both. These were obviously numbers 1, 10, 11, 100, 101, 110, and 111. It took quite a while. The photos were then displayed side by side in the gallery, and all the residents of the featured houses were invited to a special event to find their number on the wall, with one lucky winner going away with a Morrison's voucher for £50. Then came the Artist Hotel project, joining in the research for the idea of imagining an artist hotel for Knowle West. Some of my research focused on hotels in London and the South East that branded themselves as artistic, including the Artist Residence Hotel in Brighton and the St Martin's Lane Hotel in London. I like to see hotel lobbies and foyers as semi-public spaces that can be occupied, and that's what I did. I asked the price of a room. Cost of a double room is here for the night.
It varies day to day. Our rates change. What it looks like at the moment. This time of year we are really busy, so the rates probably are a little bit higher. 371, that includes the VAT for a double-double.
I wandered around to get the ambience, sometimes behaving on the edge of performance, to see how far I could go before being stopped. When it came to the presentation of my findings, I'd not long been back from a visit to Ethiopia, where corrugated metal sheets are a base building material for many homes and shops. So I decided to include hammering on a piece of locally sourced corrugated steel as an antidote to the glamorous hotel culture that I'd been inhabiting. Artists don't need a swanky hotel, nor does Knowle West. The landscape of the place on the hill in Bristol BS4 is always with me. I've spent long enough to get under its surface and be inside its weather. I've walked those streets, every one, seen the sun rise and set, explored the wilderness at the back of Greenfield School with the kids, been humbled by Steve's instinctive knowledge, looked up and looked down, listened and watched. BS4 was even with me in the Alice Springs desert and underneath the Montreal highways. Pretty clear evidence there of the concrete crumbling away again. When I was working on my new ecological project called The Naming in 2018. As a part of this, I came back to Bristol last year to explore the huge tidal range of the River Avon and the Bristol Channel, the second highest in the world, and the potential pollution in the Malago River using a lo-fi method involving unbleached tampons and UV light. The results were not conclusive, but veered on the side of not polluted, which was great news. This year I was further along with the naming and keen to share my discoveries with the people of Knowle West. I wanted to give them a direct experience of ecology in an event called Not Green. So, in January I spent a couple of days looking around and planning. Walking down the slope opposite the park centre in Daventry Road and into the trees, I'm surprised to find a flowing stream. This reminds me of Mardalsfossen waterfall in Norway, a place I'd been to the previous summer to see the site of the first ever eco-action that was led by the philosopher Arne Naess in 1970. It's one of Europe's most spectacular waterfalls. This stream here is tiny, but the sight and sound of running water are enough to make this connection. There's a distinctive large tree in the garden of the old vicarage next to St Barnabas Church. It's some kind of maple, Jim thinks. As a tree expert, he explains that this tree has been pollarded. I'm only familiar with pruning and coppicing. He tells me that pollarding is to encourage growth and to maintain a regular shape. I think of the lines of plane trees in London that have their limbs cut to stumps every year. And I wonder what you call this. Mutilation, perhaps. In the last week of February, as the day approaches, the weather forecast is worrying. Expect heavy rain, hail, and very strong winds. Although we've asked people to bring waterproof clothing, strong shoes, and an umbrella, the wind will be almost gale force. This could be tricky. Time to rethink. I go back to our meeting place at the park centre to look for ways to keep dry. There's a neglected lobby tucked away opposite the reception desk. It's enclosed and quiet, and I'll be able to play sounds and video here to the assembled group at the beginning. Then I remember one of the main themes of my bigger project, about how the naming of other species can create a separation, as if identification is enough. Oh look, this is an oak tree. That's a hedge sparrow, it's in a hedge. Can you hear the woodpecker? It's pecking wood. That's why it's called a woodpecker. Get it? So I decide to find alternative names for some of the trees that live around the edge of the park centre complex, to give them their own personal identity. Like Xylophilos, Tempest, and Sandra. So we'll start inside and then go inside-outside to the courtyard to visit a silver birch tree standing in an impressive brick planter made by the park's post-16 construction students in 2012. And then we'll come back inside to go outside where we find a forgotten pond, once funded by the Prince's Trust. And notice some savagely pruned trees at the end of some adjoining back gardens, hacked down without any respect for their feelings or dignity. And now we go all the way outside. We move across Daventry Road to look at the well-shaped tree in the vicarage and pass through the metal gate and into the majesty of the Bommie. The rain has mainly kept off, but the wind is picking up. We carefully make our way down the steep grass slope with small sideways steps. Someone is wearing trainers and becomes mud splattered in a flash as they slip. The rest of us arrive safely to find the stream still fast flowing and some trees of unknown species. Aha! No name. I climb one of these trees as a gesture of connection and to surprise the others. I suddenly feel that this is my land where I belong. Down here it's deep landscape, heavy with trees and the sound of running water, yet we're only a few meters from a busy road. People chat and hang out as if this is an achievement and a destination. I can see what they mean. Then the hail rain arrives, lashed by the wind, and we climb back up the hill to the church, where Sam, the long-haired vicar with a nose ring, has already put the soup on the stove. Once we're all inside, he unlocks the door to the interior garden that no one knows about except him and me. There was a time in the late 1920s when the farmers sold their land to the council and put the money in the bank. It was theirs to sell, that's how they saw it. And once it was sold, they soon forgot about it and had no interest in seeing the houses and schools being built over the hillsides where their animals used to graze, or that it was now called Knoll West. They went on a lavish holiday with some of the proceeds and wondered if they should have held out for more cash per acre. With modern farming methods and the decline of hedgerows, those same fields would now be edge to edge, making it hard for wildlife and wildflowers to get a grip. And then there would be the latest chemical pesticides to deal with as well. So, up here, over these 90 years, the evolution of Knoll West BS4 has proved to be a huge bonus for Bristol's biodiversity. It's become a thriving ecosystem and a green corridor that puts local farmland to shame. The data says it all.